We are ready to go whenever you are.
All right, thanks very much. So let me open the meeting of the June 6, 2022 City of Hood River Planning Commission. I will call the meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. My name is Mark Frost, and I will be presiding tonight as chair of the Planning Commission. Let me start with the Planning Director's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing to report on, our next meeting, June 20th, will actually be on Tuesday. Offices will be closed in observance of the Juneteenth federal holiday, which it will be on the 19th. So the meeting, just so you know, will be scheduled for the 21st. Please let me know if you have any conflicts with your Tuesday night schedules.
Okay, is that it?
That is it. We have one matter on tonight. Kevin has been handling this on behalf of the city, and I believe we have at least the applicant and some consultants, supporting consultants in attendance tonight.
All right, thanks, Dustin. All right, with that then, I would like to call to order the June 6, 2022 hearing of the Hood River Plan Commission. There is one hearing on tonight's agenda. Let me begin with a description of tonight's process and a few disclosures required by state law. First, it is our function in these land use cases to review the record for each application, take public testimony in a hearing such as this, and then determine whether the application meets or does not meet the applicable approval criteria in the Hood River Development Code, Comprehensive Plan, and state law. It is not our job to be more restrictive or lenient than these approvals standards allow, but rather to interpret and apply the approval standards as written. If you have any questions about what are the applicable approval criteria, they are listed and analyzed in the staff report that was issued for each of the applications prior to tonight's hearing. They will also be explained as part of the staff presentation for each item. Second, we are required to render an impartial decision on each application. This means that we cannot have a personal financial stake or bias that would prevent us from making an impartial decision. Before we begin each item, I will call for the disclosure of bias, ex parte contact, and conflicts of interest from each commissioner. Anyone in the audience will then have the opportunity to question any of us about those disclosures. All of our decisions, except for annexation and zone changes, are final unless appealed to the City Council. Our annexation and zone change decisions are just recommendations to Council. To appeal one of our decisions, you have to participate either orally or in writing before the record closes on the item you are interested in. You may raise before us any issue you might wish to preserve for subsequent appeal to City Council or LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals. You must also present to us any evidence you might wish the City Council or LUBA to see. Once we close the record on an item, that will end your ability to raise new issues or present evidence. Let me describe the order of events for the hearing on tonight's agenda. First, we will hear the staff report, which is a verbal rendition of the written report that was issued prior to tonight's hearing. Second, the applicant may present testimony. You can assume that we have read the application and other materials in the record, so please focus on any changes to the proposal or new information. We also want to hear from the applicant any objections to the analysis and any proposed conditions in the staff report. Finally, we ask that if there's opponent testimony later on, the applicant should keep careful notes, and in your rebuttal, respond to that opponent testimony. Frequently, public testimony on a land use application pertains to how the development will function or what impacts it will have. The applicant is often in the best position to answer those questions. Third, anyone else in favor of the testimony, the proposal may testify. Then, fourth, we will take neutral testimony or questions, neither for nor against. Fifth, after that, we will accept testimony from anyone opposed to the proposal. Finally, sixth, the applicant has the final right of rebuttal. The applicant has the last word because an applicant has the burden of proving compliance with the mandatory approval criteria. After that, we will check to see if staff has any parting comments following the conclusion of all other public testimony. And finally, after everyone interested in these matters has had a chance to testify, we will close the record, deliberate, and may render a decision tonight on the minor partition. Our decision, however, is not final until it is reduced to writing and officially issued. Our decisions are final unless appealed to City Council. To appeal one of our decisions, you need to participate orally or in writing before the close of the record, and you must raise before us any issues you want to preserve for such an appeal. If you need additional time to prepare your testimony, you can ask for a continuance or that the record be kept open. If you want either of these options, you must make that request during the public testimony portion of the item you're interested in before we close the record on the item. Here are some basic rules for presenting testimony in tonight's hearing. First, only present testimony in the order that I just recited. 2, begin with your name and mailing address. 3, please limit your testimony to the applicable approval criteria identified in the staff report. Our decisions are governed quite strictly by those approval criteria, so you should tailor your testimony to those criteria. They are the only issues we can take into consideration. If you believe that other or different criteria apply, please identify those and explain why you think those apply. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence with sufficient specificity to allow us or the parties to respond to the issue will preclude an appeal to City Council or LUBA based on that issue. And failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow us to respond to the issue will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Finally, we may set time limits on the presentation of tonight's testimony, although there's no limitation on written arguments that may be submitted. So that is by way of a procedural introduction for tonight's hearing. If anyone has any questions about the process as we are going forward, please feel free to ask them in the public testimony portion of the hearing. So we will now review file number 2022-09, a request by K2 Page LLC for the annexation into the city of 6 lots totaling approximately 2.76 acres, plus the car drive right-of-way and concurrent review of a 5-lot subdivision. A quorum of the Planning Commission is present, and I will now ask all members to disclose any ex parte conflicts of interest and bias in this matter. So if I could just do that one by one, if you can come off mute when I call your name. Let me start with Commissioner Irving.
I have none.
Commissioner Mitchell.
I have none.
Commissioner Stepina.
I have no conflicts of interest, no bias, ex parte. I actually drove by just because I wasn't familiar with the street because it dead ends, right? So I just wanted to see, particularly related to the comments received around the mature oak trees that were discussed in both the city engineering requirements, in the future, and also the testimony received by Mr. Lavitt. So just wanted to see what the trees look like, what the positioning was, et cetera. And it's essentially what I learned is it could be a challenge to have a road go through there and have trees being in the way without removal. So that was my primary reason for going.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoffman.
I have none.
And Vice Chair Commissioner Powers.
I have none.
And myself, I have none. All right, would anyone in the audience like to question any commissioner on any disclosure, ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, or otherwise challenge the participation of any member of the commission?
Chair Frost, might remind folks who are tuned in by Zoom that they can raise hands using the webinar tools, and if they're listening by phone, dial *9 to raise a hand.
Right. Star 9 is to raise your hand, and star 6 is to toggle the mute or an unmute. So if you want to participate at the appropriate time, please do that. Okay, seeing none, I will move on. Would any commissioner member like to make a motion to disqualify any other commissioner from hearing this application? All right, seeing none, we shall continue. May I have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair Frost and Commissioners. As noted by Chair Frost, the proposal before the Commission tonight includes an annexation as well as a concurrent review of a 5-lot subdivision. Because the subdivision is being reviewed concurrently, both applications are being processed in accordance with the procedures for a quasi-judicial action. The Planning Commission will forward a recommendation on the annexation to the City Council, and the Commission will make a decision on the subdivision application. The City Council will make the final decision on the annexation. Approval of the subdivision is contingent upon approval and completion of the annexation. The staff report presents draft findings of fact and recommended conditions of approval. The electronic version of the staff report with attachments was over 25 megabytes, which was too large to post as a single document on the city's website. So I had to break it into 2 parts. You'll find part 1 includes the staff report and attachment A.1, and part 2 includes attachments A2 through H. The applicable criteria for the annexation are Hood River Municipal Code Section 17.09.040, quasi-judicial actions, and Chapter 17.15, annexation policy. In addition, the annexation must be consistent with Oregon Revised Statute Sections 222.111 through 222.183, annexation of contiguous territory. The annexation is proposed by K2 Page LLC to obtain sanitary sewer from the city to serve homes on the proposed lots. In order to qualify for annexation, property must be contiguous to the city limits. Property proposed to be annexed includes the applicant's 1.25 acre parcel, which is contiguous to the city limits, as well as 5 lots from the Sunburst Valley subdivision and the existing Car Drive right-of-way. Please note there is an error, I believe, in the staff report indicating the annexation territory totals 2.76 acres. This is my mistake. I added the area of a separate legal description of the Car Drive right-of-way that was provided by the applicant. I believe the final order should reflect an annexation area totaling approximately 2.43 acres, including the Car Drive right-of-way. The privately owned properties that are subject to the annexation are known as 3 North, 10 East, 34A, tax lots 4300, 4301, 4302, 4303, 4304, and 4400. They're located adjacent to the north side and eastern terminus of Car Drive. You can see a location map in your report. It's attachment B. You'll find it on page 86 of the part 2 PDF. City limits boundary abuts the east side of the annexation territory. All affected properties currently are zoned urban low density residential. They're in the urban growth area, so they're denoted as UR1, and they will remain urban low density residential R-1 following annexation. All property affected by the annexation will be withdrawn from the West Side Rural Fire Protection District, and all property will remain in the Ice Fountain Water District for potable water service, as well as the Farmers Irrigation District. The applicant submitted consent to annexation agreements that were signed by previous owners of the affected properties in order to demonstrate conformance with a method of annexation under state law that is known as the triple majority. This is detailed in ORS 222.170 sub 1, which states the legislative body of a city need not call or hold an election in any contiguous territory proposed to be annexed if more than half of the owners of the land in the territory, who also own more than half of the land in the contiguous territory and of real property therein, representing more than half of the assessed value of all real property in the contiguous territory, consent in writing to the annexation of their land in the territory. Attachment A1D on pages 88 through 98 of the Part 1 PDF details the consent to annexation agreements that are being relied upon. The applicant also submitted a worksheet, attachment A.1B, page 84 of the Part 1 PDF, that summarize how the annexation agreements demonstrate that more than half of the owners of the land in the territory, who also own more than half of the land in the contiguous territory, and represent more than half of the assessed value of that property, consent in writing to the annexation. Based on the evidence submitted by the applicant and summarized in the staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission forwards a recommendation for approval of the annexation to the City Council, subject to the findings and draft conditions of approval in the staff report. In order to ensure consistency with city annexation policy and city development standards, conditions of approval are recommended that the applicant shall execute a contractually binding annexation agreement before the City Council approves the ordinance annexing the land that is subject to this annexation. That's prior to the second reading of the ordinance. The annexation agreement will be prepared by the city and will detail requirements for right-of-way dedication and public and private improvements consistent with the findings and conditions of approval. Again, approval of the 5-lot subdivision is contingent upon completion of the annexation of the properties currently known as 3N, 10 East, 34A, tax lots 4300, 4301, 4302, 4303, 4304, and 4400. City Council will hold a separate hearing on the annexation application, currently scheduled for June 27th, not earlier than 6 p.m. With that, are there any questions about the annexation application before I move on to describe the subdivision application? All right, I'll continue then. The property that is subject of the subdivision is located east of the terminus of Carr Drive and west of Phase 4 and 5 of the Willow Ponds planned unit development. Its legal description is 3 North, 10 East, 34 AC, tax lot 4400, and there's an existing home on the site addressed at 3940 Carr Drive. The applicable criteria for the subdivision are Hood River Municipal Code sections 1703.010 R1 zone, 1703.120 interchange area management plan overlay zone, 17.20.060 transportation circulation and access management, and Title 16 subdivisions, including criteria specified in section 1608.020 sub C, and general design and improvement standards specified in chapter 16.12. The staff report presents draft findings of fact and conditions of approval for the subdivision. Single-family dwellings are anticipated on the new lots with individual driveways connected to Carr Drive. There's a drainage way on the east side of the site, and there are inventoried wetlands to the east of the site. The city's local wetland inventory does not identify wetlands on this property. A public pathway easement is recommended on the east side of the site between Carr Drive and the subdivision's northern property line to meet connectivity standards specified in Hood River Municipal Code 16.12.020 sub I. The city engineering department comments address requirements for dedication of right-of-way and for public street and utility improvements. These requirements have been included as recommended conditions of approval in the staff report. Traffic impacts are addressed in the applicant's traffic assessment letter, which shows the effects of 4 net new homes. Remember, we've got 1 existing home on the properties, 5 new proposed, so a net of 4 new homes. And the traffic assessment letter assumes 1 p.m. peak hour trip through the Cascade Rand intersection, but the subdivision site is outside of the proportionate share district for that intersection, which does not extend south of May Street. The study also assumes 1 p.m. peak hour trip through the Mount Adams Cascade intersection, where the city does not have an adopted proportionate share district. Because there is no existing proportionate share district for Mount Adams Cascade intersection improvements, and because the development site is outside the boundary of the Cascade Rand district, the city engineer is not recommending a proportionate share for the 1 p.m. peak hour trip through the Mount Adams Cascade intersection. That said, system development charges for transportation and other capital improvements will be collected in association with building permits. There are numerous significant trees on the property, meaning, and when I refer to significant trees, I mean those that are native species of 6 inches and greater diameter at breast height. And those include trees along the southern property line where Carr Drive is to be extended. As Commissioner Stepina noted, neighboring property owners submitted comments requesting redesign of the Carr Drive extension in order to retain several Oregon white oak trees along the site's southern property line. In designing the Carr Drive extension, it's my understanding the applicant's engineer considered city standards as well as the location and elevation of the approved Willow Ponds planned unit development phases 4 and 5 to facilitate street connectivity. In response to the neighboring property owner's inquiry, the city engineering department is willing to consider design exceptions to narrow pavement width from 28 feet to a minimum of 20 feet. That's the minimum required for two-way traffic. And also to move the street further north by eliminating a planter strip / bioretention swale on the north side of the street. Even if pavement width is permitted to be reduced, and even if the street is pushed further north, it appears that construction of the car drive extension will result in impacts to critical root zones of these trees. The degree of impact is best determined by a certified arborist in conjunction with the city engineer. As such, staff recommends a condition of approval that the applicant and applicant's certified arborist shall coordinate with the city engineer during final engineering of street and utility improvements and grading plans to retain native trees on the site where practicable during construction of the subdivision improvements as determined by the city engineer. Comments from the Ice Fountain Water District, Farmers Irrigation District, and Fire Chief, as well as the city engineering department, are attached to the staff report. Based on the evidence submitted by the applicant and summarized in the staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approves the subdivision subject to the findings and draft conditions of approval. Again, if approved, completion of the subdivision will be contingent upon City Council approval of and completion of the annexation. With that, are there any questions about the subdivision application?
Go ahead, Commissioner Irving.
Let me get back to the document. I think it was in the first document. In page 43 of 69. I was trying to get to the bottom of it. It says that there's 2-inch existing pressure sewer in Carr. And then it looks like there's proposed an extension of the 2-inch sewer, but then I read somewhere that there's a future 8-inch gravity that will be constructed to the west in Carr Drive as part of Willow Ponds, and that confused me. I'm in the second paragraph of page 43 of the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Irving. Yes, at this time, the recommendation is for the applicant to connect to the 2-inch pressure main, but they first need to verify that there's capacity in that main to connect to it. We believe there is, but there's a recommendation from the city engineer to make sure that's the case. And the idea is, in fact, to connect to that pressure main. However, the engineering department goes on just to recommend that the applicant coordinates with neighboring property owners, recognizing there will be a gravity main to the east of the site in Willow Ponds. It's really a matter of timing. And that gravity line is not expected to be constructed until phase 5 of Willow Ponds. So presumably this subdivision is out in front and will rely on the pressure main. But in the event that they needed to, they could wait perhaps to connect to that gravity line.
Okay. Is then a typo where it says a future 8-inch gravity will be constructed to the west in Carr Drive? Should that say to the east?
It should say to the east. That's a mistake.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I was that's what threw me.
Thank you.
One typo probably, I think, in page 42 under the findings for number 7. I think you should have public utilities as outlined. There should probably be a D on there. It's in the middle of the paragraph.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
That-
Yep.
that was my question.
I can capture those. Thank you very much.
Yep. Okay. Sounds good.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Irving. Vice Chair, Commissioner Powers. You're on mute.
Yeah, I had a question on the width of the road. If it's narrowed down to accommodate those 2 oak trees, would that be the full length of the road that would be narrowed down to 20 feet, or would just be the smaller section of it, or how would that work?
Chair Powers, I'm not certain. I think that would be determined by the city engineer, again, in conjunction with the arborist. We've got a variety of standards in the city's engineering standards that address things like centerline radii in a street and a variety of design considerations. So I think first thing is to look at the trees, look at the root zones, try to determine the extent of the impact and whether or not they can be worked around, and then design the street. The city engineering department is open to this idea of narrowing the street because they recognize that once we get east of this site in the Willow Ponds neighborhood, it does narrow down to 20 feet. So if that narrowing were to start a little bit further west, or even at the furthest west point on this site, I think the city engineering department is open to that. One consequence to keep in mind when you narrow the street width to 20 feet, you will eliminate on-street parking. So I think if there was the ability to have some of the street wider, meeting that 28-foot requirement so that there could be some on-street parking, that'd probably be the preference.
It wouldn't eliminate the sidewalk, is that correct, on the north side?
That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah, the sidewalk is an essential component for consistency with the transportation system plan. We've got a segment of the West Side Community Trail that runs through this site. So we need to make sure we do connect from Frankton through this site.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Powers. Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Irving? I think you're still on mute.
So looking at the design, the proposed drawings, there are some spots where, well, one, there's a temporary fire truck turnaround. Is there going to be, that's going to last for the duration that until the road connectivity happens? Is that the plan there, Kevin?
That's my understanding. It's not stated clearly in the city fire chief's comments, but it's my understanding, yes, this is in fact a temporary turnaround and that it can go away upon extension of the road. The subdivision plat includes an easement for the turnaround, so we may need to work with the applicant on some language and kind of address the timing as a part of the final plat process to make sure we've got a method to free up those properties that are encumbered by that easement after the turnaround is no longer required.
Okay, and then I guess my question is that I would assume that you cannot have a curb where the turnaround is. Is that probably
yeah,
accurate?
absolutely. Yeah, we need
Okay.
to have a driveway approach where that temporary turnaround is installed.
And then there are driveway approaches. Are those also shown on the drawings to be in the center of the lot?
They are depicted. Let me find the exhibit that's got.
I was looking on page 23 of that. I think I'm in the second page, the PDF 2 of 2.
Yeah, I think it shows up on the utility plan. One of the applicant's plan, you kind of have to zoom in a bit to see the line work, but it does depict location of driveways. I think those are approximate
Yes.
at this time. I think that the key thing is they were showing consistency with separation requirements, which require typically a minimum 22 feet of straight curb between cuts.
Okay, that was kind of my question. And then we're going to have a curb cut there. Then we're going to have another temporary one. I'm assuming we would have sidewalk through the temporary one, but we probably would not have trees in the planting strip in
That's
front
my
of the temporary turnaround.
That's my understanding. You would not see trees that would interfere with access to the turnaround. The fire chief did include comments that the design of the turnaround needs to include some radii. It can't just be, a
Right.
90-degree cut to the street. They need some radii on that so they can get
Got it.
their apparatus in and out.
Do you feel like the findings we have related to this are adequate for creating it and then making it go away? And I don't know if there's any responsibility for applicant or owners to plant trees in the strip when it goes away, or to get rid of the curb there, or install a curb versus a driveway approach there. I don't know. How do we typically handle that, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, good question, Commissioner Irving. I don't have a recommendation from the city engineer that gets into that level of detail. There are no findings right now in the document. I think we could add something. Maybe we can hear from the applicant and see if they would like some specificity in the findings that address that.
Okay.
Otherwise, my expectation would be that they would just work with the city engineering department during the planning process to make sure that things are designed correctly and that there is a mechanism in place that, or an agreement, maybe this is addressed in the annexation agreement, that helps explain the timing and process for removal of the turnaround and completion of improvements, installation of the curb, street trees as needed.
Okay, that's my question.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Irving. Back to you, Commissioner Powers.
Yeah, one more question on the trail connectivity, Kevin. Is that going to start at the sidewalk that's on the north side there of Carr and then head north and go how far?
At this time, so two trails. So we've got the west side trail extension that is essentially the sidewalk that runs on the north side of Carr Drive. And then
Okay.
for connectivity purposes, you see this on the preliminary plat, adjacent to stormwater facility, an easement for a public pedestrian path to meet those standards for connectivity that are in 16-12-020 sub I, just between Carr Drive and the site's northern property line. So that at a point in time when the property that is immediately north of this develops, then we can work with the owner and developer of that property to extend the path.
Okay, so for now, that path effectively goes
Dead
nowhere.
ends.
It doesn't connect to anything. Okay.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff? All right, with that then, let us move to applicant's testimony. So if we could have, Amy, if you could promote our attendees who will be presenting, please. Okay, I see Ron and EDC Zoom 3. Welcome to the call. You can go ahead. And again, if you want to use the controls in the Zoom panel, there is a mute button in the bottom left, and there's also a video if that's available to you. Or if you're on the phone, you can use *6 to mute or unmute. All right, I see a video with Ron.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I've got Jesse and CJ Page sitting.
Excellent.
And and we've got Austin Bell as well representing us. What questions would you like us to address?
Ron, you want me just to kind of do a little presentation and then we can.
Yeah, that'd be great. Very, very short presentation. Obviously, the applicants and ourselves, Bell Design, is working as the consultant on this. We met with the city in a pre-application meeting for both the annexation and the subdivision. And of course, that was with city staff and engineering, planning, fire consultant for their plan review. And from that meeting, they kind of gave us direction. So we presented these two applications. I don't have any real comments. The city staff's the review and for the annexation and the subdivision seem to meet all the requirements, and the recommended conditions seem reasonable and within what we're probably going to have to do. Just to address a couple of things that come up already. As Kevin said, that the intent is for this to be built before there would be access to the gravity line for sewer, and we did talk with the owners to the east for the Is that Willow Ponds to the east? Yeah.
Yes.
And it just that, yeah, there was, this timing was, it wasn't going to happen. There wasn't going to be anything to dump a sewer in. So, so the hope is to go through the pressure. And I don't believe that study's been done yet, but it preliminary looks like it'll be fine. Then the temporary turnaround, yeah, the plans don't really show that temporary turnaround as a constructed turnaround. I don't know. I think we were at this time thinking that we would be connecting when we made these, months ago, we'd be connecting to maybe a road there, but that's not gonna, it'll be too far in the future. So that in the final design, we'll show the temporary turnaround. Just to note, to the west in that subdivision there, the temporary turnaround is there as well, and it's a paved area. I didn't see any on that document. There doesn't appear to be any, really clear what happens to it. Probably becomes a nice place to park boats. But so there could be something that says what happens in the future. But there will be a temporary, not only will there be an easement for it, there'll be something for turnaround. And then finally on the trees, I know there was the owners had an initial inspection from a tree arborist, and it's going to be hard to save some of those. But obviously we'll look at that in design. And they do they're kind of like along the whole southern part. So if some or more can be saved by moving the road, that might be an option. But if they were all if we saved them all, pretty much the whole road would be made short and moved to the north. So because you wouldn't want little bumps here and there, it'd be either all or a small portion. So we'll see how that works in design. But at this point, I think initially from the arborist said it's going to be really hard to save them just where they're sitting. So those are the only comments I had. We'll take them.
All right. Any questions? Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
question, Austin, is that current turnaround on Carr, is it that area, I guess, between lots 4 and 5 that just basically is concrete and like it blends with the driveways?
It's just a big, concrete area. It's big, it's right between the two lots. That's correct.
Okay. Just for everyone, there's a picture of that area on page 57 of the part 2 of 2. You can kind of see it.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
So I met with David Braun, who is an arborist, and we walked the property. The 2 smaller oak trees that are kind of right in front of lot 4, they're like 19 and 20 inches. They sit right on the creek that's flowing, or the excess stormwater that's flowing from the southern property there. He told me in his estimation, those trees are probably 10 to 15 years in age. They've just grown super fast because of the amount of water that they are allowed from the existing storm runoff that flows through that property. So they aren't, those would be easily, in my opinion, replanted further, as another tree after construction. That would be my hope. So.
Okay, appreciate that. Anyone else from the applicant wish to testify?
No.
Commissioner Powers, you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the primary motivation on annexation, and that's for the sewer piece of it, or are there other benefits in the subdivision to having it annexed into the city?
Chair Frost, do you mind if I jump in to respond
go
to this
ahead.
one in part?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Commissioner Powers, I think it's twofold. First of all, the applicant needs to annex in order to obtain sewer to serve their property in the subdivision.
Mhm.
At the time of the pre-application conference, city staff asked the applicant to also bring in the other homes that are on Carr Drive so that the entire street will be in one jurisdiction rather than a portion of it in the county, which doesn't maintain it, doesn't do snow plowing, and a portion, and then the eastern portion of it in the city. Let's bring the entire thing in at the same time.
Mhm.
So that was recommended by city staff at the time of the pre-application conference.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, seeing none then, let us move forward then. So now we will look for public comments. First off, we will ask for any proponents, i.e. those who are for the project, the annexation and the subdivision. And then we'll go to neutral and then we'll go to opposed. So if anyone is wanting to speak towards the application, you may now raise your hand. And again, if you want to raise your hand and you're on the phone, that would be a *9. All right, with that then we'll move forward. I don't see any, so let's move forward with anyone neutral, neither for nor against. And finally, anyone opposed to the application? All right, seeing none, we will move forward. This would be the point we would ask for an applicant's rebuttal. I don't think you have anything to rebut. So unless you want to add anything else, I think we'll move forward. And staff recap.
Thank you, Chair Frost. As noted by Commissioner Irving, I've got a couple of typos to clean up on pages 42 and 43 of the report that will fold into the final order. And I'll also, if the commission thinks it's appropriate, include some language in the final order that recommends coordination between the applicant and city engineering department on the final design of the turnaround, including measures for its removal in the future. And those would be the two issues that I think are outstanding at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I have a question about that, which is that, I mean, what we can see with the first part of Carr Drive is that if that turns into, if that turnaround is no longer required, I could see people parking cars and boats there. Or how do people feel about that? If what we want is a sidewalk with street trees, and we're talking about something that might happen 5 to 15 years from now, when the rest of Willow Ponds happens, you know, who's going to go back to whom and when to get that rebuilt, along with new trees planted at that time? Imagine 15 years from now. How would we authorize, or how would we make sure that happens?
Chair Frost, if you don't mind, I will bring it up with the city engineer, and I can provide additional direction at the time of the city council discussion. But until I speak with them, I don't have a firm response for you. I think ultimately this could fall to the city to finish it up. The Sunburst Valley subdivision, where you see the concrete turnaround that hasn't been removed and there has been no enforcement. It's currently under county jurisdiction. The comments that we got from the city fire chief, his expectation is this could be a gravel turnaround, really intended to be temporary, would need to be signed. You know, city code enforcement officer would be responsible for enforcement to make sure people are not parking boats, RVs, and vehicles in there until such time that it's time to get rid of it and turn it back into private property.
Right.
Or I'm sorry, it remains private property with an easement. Turn it back to remove
The easement?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, appreciate that. Okay, any other questions for staff before we close the hearing?
I got a quick question. I don't know if
Okay, go
it's
ahead.
totally relevant other than for my understanding for future things. How does, I was surprised to see that this would still remain supplied by ice fountain water. How will the transition to city water happen for that if and when it would?
The Commissioner Irving, the city and Ice Fountain Water District have an agreement in place that addresses transition from one provider to another. It specifies that beginning as early as the pre-application conference that we need to start coordinating, make sure that city and district understand who's going to be providing water to the site. In this case, the district, as I understand it, has a main line that runs down Frankton, and it was easiest in this case for them to continue serving this neighborhood as it builds out. But there are provisions in the agreement between the city and the district that spell out how the city can go about essentially purchasing that infrastructure from the district for a certain period of time, addresses depreciation and how that works. And at a certain point in time would become probably more financially feasible for the city to do that. But presumably it would include a much greater area. So quite a bit of coordination will need to happen with the district and the city to move from service by Ice Fountain to the city. This is going to affect neighborhoods, including Stonegate, right?
Right. Would it, it was contemplated that it had to be built to the city standards. Does that mean that is this also a connectivity to the east to Willow Ponds thing? Is that what they discussed or no?
In all cases, water infrastructure that is constructed inside the urban growth boundary, even if it's going to be maintained and operated by Ice Fountain, needs to be constructed to city standards. I haven't seen any coordination or anything in writing between the city and Ice Fountain on this particular site that talks about an intertie, essentially a valve between a city system in Willow Ponds and an Ice Fountain system on Carr Drive. But there are interties. There are locations where the lines can essentially be connected by turning a valve.
Okay.
There's
All right.
in any case, coordination between the city and the district on the design.
Yep. Thanks for a little background.
I think, by the way, Willow Ponds is still on Ice Fountain. So,
pardon me.
by the
Thank
way.
you.
All right. With that, then, thanks for the staff recap, Kevin. I will close the hearing, and we shall have the Planning Commission deliberate on the annexation of 6 lots on Carr Drive, including the right of way, and the review of the 5-lot subdivision. So, who would like to get us started off? Any comments, questions, issues, things that we want to change in the staff report?
I'll go. I'm
Go
pretty
ahead.
comfortable that it's met the criteria for annexation as well as the subdivision criteria. And I would, the only kind of findings I have for the staff report are the couple corrections and then that clarification possibly on the fire truck turnaround. I'm comfortable with that. So,
Okay. Thanks, Commissioner Irving. And the comments or questions, issues or concerns?
I raised my hand, but I'll just go ahead and
There
start
we go. I
talking.
see you. Yep.
All I was going to say is that I think that Commissioner Irving and Vice Chair Powers covered the things that I had concerns about, which included the tree conversation and the issues with the turnaround, and hearing that it could be a gravel turnaround. If there's a way you can recommend that be what happens to it, I think that would solve a lot of the issues with the future removal and whatever issues there might be when you consider paving over things and stormwater, etc. That's my 2 cents on that.
Okay. Thanks very much, Commissioner Hoffman. Any other comments, questions, concerns about approving this? All right. Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to move forward a recommendation to City Council for the recommendation of this annexation, subject to the findings and conditions of approval included in the staff report, and also the Planning Commission's approval of the 5-lot subdivision named Bronco Meadow subdivision, subject to the findings and drafts conditions of approval, along with additional language as just suggested around the turnaround and changing that back once that turnaround is no longer required. And that is it. So would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve file 2022-09, annexation of a annexation and a new subdivision for K2 Page LLC with the conditions as stated. In addition, the corrections that Bill had noted to the typos in the existing report, and then an additional condition on engineering design of the fire truck turnaround with a stated recommendation from the Planning Commission that it be gravel.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Do we have a second?
Also, please.
All right. I think I saw Commissioner Stepina step into that. All right. So we have a motion on the floor to forward recommendation to City Council for this annexation and approval of the subdivision as noted with updates on the typos and language to be included around turning the turnaround into a, or so bringing that back into a more normal public use with trees in the future. All right, any further discussion?
Yeah, can we have a quick discussion on it? I think this is a good point, and maybe Kevin's going to go back to talk to, I guess, engineering and fire about it. But it seems like our desire is that when it goes away, it looks like a normal street section where
Correct. Yeah.
we have street trees there, we have sidewalk there. We probably, I don't know if we need to go back to a normal curb or not, but I think we could, in our motion or amend this motion, make it clear that we're not just looking for gravel. We really want it to get, when it's over, we want some mechanism and enforcement to make it go back to the way the original design would have been. Does that sound accurate?
That's kind of what I was trying to say with the mention of the word trees. I would like to see it be a regular street. So Kevin, if we could write it in that motion, write it in that way.
Understood. Does the commission, would it be comfortable if the city engineering department is essentially addressing design of the curb, installation of the trees, completion of concrete and street improvements, and allowing the property owners to, for example, remove gravel, replant with landscaping, rather than the city taking responsibility for that aspect of things? And I'm sorry, this is off the cuff. I've not discussed this with the city engineer. I think it will be helpful if we can give the city engineer some direction, but ultimately we're going to put it in the city engineer's hands to pin down the requirements with the applicant's engineer.
That seems reasonable. Somebody, developer, city, whether it's a bond or who knows what, but there's some mechanism where the city infrastructure gets rebuilt in the right of way, and then stuff that's outside of the right of way on private property that's gravel, the property owners could re-landscape or something. And then extinguishment of the easement is probably important there too.
Right. Okay, do we need to restate the motion then? Or are we good at this point procedurally?
I have enough information to work with. Planning Director Nelson, any thoughts? We okay?
No, we have As long as there's a consensus amongst the PC on this, we have direction. The idea of needing some sort of measure or trigger to revert that temporary turn back into full right of way and assigning a responsible party in time and a milestone. I think we can handle that and have that memorialized in the final ordinance.
Okay. All right, just to recap then, so we will forward this recommendation to City Council for the annexation, and Planning Commission is approving this 5-lot subdivision, Bronco Meadow subdivision, including additional language to be added in the conditions of approval around reverting this temporary fire truck turnaround into regular streetscape. Okay, with that then, let us take a vote. So if I could just go down through the names again and have you come off mute and tell me how you vote. So let's start at the top I'm looking at. So Commissioner Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Irving,
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell. Oh wait, I just got you. Commissioner Powers,
Aye.
Commissioner Stefina,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Commissioner Powers.
Aye.
Did I miss anyone?
Nope.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Okay, I appreciate your time, everyone. Thank you for your participation, including to the applicant. Any further business, Dustin, before we close?
Thank you, Chair. One last item. After 7 years, Jennifer Caden is going to be leaving the city. And so this is going to be her last meeting, and she can have the, certainly have the floor to say her best, or this is the final terms. I don't know what this is going to be. So this could be good. This could be ugly.
Is there
It's
cake?
empty
You
on
should have
YouTube,
told
though.
us. We would have shown up for cake.
No cake. I just want to say I've enjoyed working with all of you. I'm not leaving Hood River, so you never know. I might show up and testify at a meeting in the future. I'm sandwiched between an impending empty nest and rapidly aging parents. I'm going to take some time to spend time with my family, and but I'm still going to be around, and I hope to see you all around town. And I'm leaving I just feel like I've wrapped up a couple big projects. We finally landed the co-housing project. It's under construction. And the city council recently adopted an affordable housing strategy that I spent a lot of time on in the last year. I'm going to leave implementation of that strategy in good hands with new Commissioner Kate Hoffman, who sat on the advisory task force for that project. So, and Dustin has the plan, and hopefully some of those things will be put in place in the near future and in the coming years. So thank you all. I've enjoyed working with all of you, even brief meetings I've had with a couple of you, but wish everybody well. Thanks.
Jennifer, thank you for
Jennifer.
everything that you did.
Good luck.
And,
Thank you, Jennifer.
some momentous
good luck
projects
to
there.
you.
And Mark, maybe I'll see you back at the pool at some point.
All right. With that, then, it is 6:28. I will close the meeting. Thanks for your help, and have a great week.